On today's show, what did we learn in the Capitals' first preseason loss? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, the Caps drop their first preseason game. What did we learn in this game? Was it all bad and no good? No, there was some good in the game. I'll talk about both of them. A bit later, we'll talk about Spencer Carberry on what he saw with the Capitals' blue line, the defense in tonight's game. And then to close out the show, the latest with the roster battles surrounding this team. But let's just dive into it here. The Capitals earning their first loss of this preseason. And you know what I talked about, and regardless if it's winning or if it's losing, that it's more about assessment, right? And that holds true. You know, and what I've said on this show is it feels good to win, of course, even though it's the preseason. But all things considered, you know, the Capitals fought in this game. But as it turns out, the Bruins walk away victorious in this game here. So let's dive into the latest in what we learned as we see the Capitals drop 3-1 to the Bruins. You know, like I said, not the end of the world, but it is what it is. It's the first preseason loss. So there's a lot to chew on what we saw in this game. The man himself, Alex Ovechkin, was back on the ice, picking up some big minutes. Ryan Leonard looks more comfortable to me playing in the National Hockey League. The most comfortable I have seen thus far. I think that he's finally getting the hang of it. And Spencer Carberry had some pretty honest thoughts about the defense. So that's what we're going to dive into here in the first segment of the show, is talking about the Caps, because the Caps looked good, like really good. They outshot Boston in this game, all things considered. And, you know, when you think to yourself, you're out shooting your opponent, well, you should walk away winning this game, right? It's not always the case. If we're wanting to talk about, shots on goal, it was 34 shots on goal for the Capitals versus Boston's 28. So, you know, you take a look at it, they were getting in some shots trying to find the back of the net, but Korpisalo was huge in net for the Bruins tonight. Another team that has a bit of a goalie controversy brewing on their end as well. But talking about Ryan Leonard, once again, made an impact. He scored the only goal for the Capitals in this game, and, you know, kind of just hanging around the net, pouncing on a rebound and bearing it home. That Ryan Leonard, like I said, looked comfortable in this game. And that's encouraging. And he was also bared the brunt of some physicality as well, that I think that, you know, we can't hear what's being said on the ice, but he must have been getting under the skin of the Boston Bruins. And, you know, that's exactly what we want to see from Ryan Leonard in this preseason, is him just generating shots and finding the back of the net and playing that physical game. And also, you know, bringing a little bit of snarl to his game, because he does have that as well. But another player in this game that really popped, and I think, you know, surprise, surprise, I did not think I was going to say this going into the preseason, whether it be the camp or the preseason games here, is Hendrick Lapierre was big in the game tonight as well. And like I talked about, he signed that bridge deal, kind of a prove it deal. And I think that he has been up to the task at hand. In tonight's game, 1 shot on goal, 1 assist, but was entrusted in some special teams opportunities out there that, Spencer Carberry, wanted to get a long look at him to see how he performs under different situations. But in the game tonight, not flashy, but winning face-offs, retrieving pucks, and making the smart plays that coaches love. And it's going to be interesting to see what direction Spencer Carberry and Chris Patrick and the Capitals choose to go in, because if you ask me right now, it changes on a game-to-game basis, right? Talking about what player I think is going to make the roster, but Hendrick Lapierre has looked good. Sonny Milano has looked good. Leonard, Miroshnichenko, that it is going to be a tough call when you have to start making some of these final cuts here. And you take a look at the second period rolls around and the script flips. Boston starts dictating the pace. I have a feeling that their coach read them the riot act during intermission there, winning battles in the middle of the ice. And Joonas Korpisalo, he just slammed the door shut. And a veteran, on that team that was huge in net for Boston. And they, like I said earlier, they have some interesting things that they have to deal with as well, as far as how they are going to handle their net mining situation. But on the night, he saved 33 of 34 shots for Joonas Korpisalo. So a guy that was dialed in and ultimately was instrumental in the Bruins picking up the dub tonight. But, it wasn't for a lack of trying. The Capitals did the thing. They threw everything at him. But the problem is he had the answers all night. And that was the difficult part. But like I say, Ovechkin, man, he was out of the frying pan into the fire. We know, if you're an everydayer, and if you follow the Capitals, that he left the first preseason practice early on, and there was a feeling like, what is going on here? So this was his first game of the preseason and played about 21 minutes. Didn't light the world on fire. 1 shot, a few hits, but at the end of the day, like I said, I hate to say that it's the preseason and it doesn't have a big impact. It does. But I think that, being that this is his first preseason game, that let's have it be a slow build for him. And more of a ramp-up game, I guess, is what I would say, what I noticed in the game. And I have no doubt in my mind that when it's opening night, he will be pedal to the metal and ready to take it to the opponent there. But the big surprise in this game, and, I talk about different players that surprise from one game to the next, and sometimes it's the expected ones in this preseason. I've spoke a fair amount about Sonny Milano. I've spoke a fair amount about Hendrick Lapierre, these kind of guys, Kristol. But a guy that popped off the page tonight was Sheldon Rempel. Actually led the team in attempts. Didn't have that on my bingo card, but the theme here is that the players, the young players, showing up to play. And so that's the difficult position for the Capitals now, is what players going to stick around. Because, when I talk about the different players, Leonard, like I said earlier, keeps showing that he belongs. And that's the difficult part, is how are these players going to really rise to the top and prove that I'm the one that belongs here. The same thing with Kristol. I think that he could make this team. There are going to be some players that don't make this team that probably should, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the final segment. But special teams, again, something that if you want to talk about last season, kind of bit them in the butt from time to time, was the case tonight. The Capitals went 0 for 4. And that hurts, preseason or not, you want to cash at least once. And that was not the case because that literally could have been the difference in this game if the Capitals made good on some of their opportunities. It was also not Charlie Lindgren's finest hour, where the puck was right there and he tried to poke check and it went 5-hole right through his legs there and found the back of the net. So, and then there was the other play that if it was the regular season, would have been reviewed, but they don't have, the situation room, if you will, up in Toronto during the preseason. But, a tougher evening for Chucky, all things considered. It was one of the games where he wasn't horrible, but he wasn't stellar either. But rebound control, traffic reads definitely needs to clean some of those things up. So overall, for Boston, a hot goalie, Capitals missed opportunities on the power play, and a strong start that didn't last. And, it's easy to talk about negativity, and sometimes that can kind of permeate over the Capitals' overall success this preseason. And I don't want that to be the case because, like I said, the Capitals have played really well this preseason. And, at some point, you're going to come up against a brick wall. And in this case, it was Korpisalo and a Bruins team that is proving that they're still a decent hockey team, even though they've been panned really early here as well. And they're going to come out swinging to start the season. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Spencer Carberry as he weighs in on the defensive battles as well. I'll discuss straight ahead. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many different ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during the game. And the thing that I love about FanDuel is I have my favorite football teams. You have your football teams as well. So whether it's the Commanders or the Ravens, and you're watching on a Sunday or on a Monday or whenever they're playing and say, I'm not really into this game, but I could be. What is it going to take for me to be into this game? I got the answer. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, all the games inside the NFL got that much more exciting. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in the second segment here, Spencer Carberry weighed in on the defense. And, we see the players that are out there, the players that have looked good. I'm talking Vincent Iorio, a player that has been big. The Capitals organization has been hot on Vincent Iorio, and a lot of different times the feeling was that he was going to be the answer on the blue line. Hasn't really materialized yet. He's had some call-ups due to injuries and that kind of thing over the years. But the hard part about a guy like Vinny, for example, is that if he does not make the big team, well, he is going to have to clear waivers before he is sent to Hershey. So let's talk about the defense and what Spencer Carberry, the coach, the man, had to say about the defense. And, Carberry really gave us something after the game. He wasn't thrilled. The second period, he called it out. Turnovers, breakaways. And how Boston got their goals, right? And when they were talking to him about it, they were saying, Carberry on Vincent Iorio and Dylan McIlrath. And he basically said they had some moments, but they need to be cleaner. That we're not going to pump these guys up too much. That it was a good game in certain regards on the defense, but just taking a look at the box score. And I understand it's not the blue line's job exclusively. Charlie Lindgren factors into that as well, being a defender as well, playing in net, that's part of his job as well. But things do need to get cleaned up. And because at NHL speed, you don't have time. If you hesitate, the puck is in the back of your net. And that was one of the things that was made apparent in the game tonight. Because here's the player that Carberry really singled out. A guy that played for the University of Minnesota, Ryan Chesley. flat out said, you know who I thought was really good tonight? Ryan Chesley. That quote comes to us from the Hockey News, but a very telling thing to say that, I think that in a lot of ways people are like, well, what about Vincent Iorio? What about Dylan McElrath, right? That those are the players kind of on the bubble. And then he kind of pulled one out of there like, hey, I actually liked Ryan Chesley's game. And for Ryan, that's big. He liked how calm he was, even playing on his offside, didn't panic, moved the puck really clean, and that earned him another game. Do I think that Ryan Chesley is going to make the final roster and be on the Capitals roster in game 1 of the regular season? I do not. I don't think that there is as many questions on the blue line as there is with the forwards, but I definitely think that there is a possibility that at some point during the season, if there's injury or inconsistent play or trades or this or that or the other thing, that we could get an opportunity to see Ryan Chesley on the big team. I like his game. I have watched him play in some games for the University of Minnesota, a really great player. And we think about how the Capitals had to move things around to acquire him in the first place. It was trading Vanacek to New Jersey, and they acquired a draft pick there, and ultimately how the Capitals landed Ryan Chesley in the first place. So the Capitals wanted Chesley, and he has been, I don't want to say a surprise. I guess I'm going to say a pleasant surprise. But all things considered, I agree with Spencer Carberry's assessment. He looked in the right spots at the right time, and he looked like an NHL player. And like I've talked about in this show, oftentimes that is half the battle. And that's what you want from these young guys. One good performance buys you another look, and we'll see who is in the next preseason game. And another look buys you a chance to stick around. So is there a chance that Chesley sticks around? Of course, there's anything that's possible. He has not been cut from the roster yet. But I think what he has, if you're asking me where he's at right now, I think that he has earned the right to be one of the first call-ups, if not the first call-up when injuries strike. But talking about players making a big impact on the blue line, and was rewarded with a big-time contract in the offseason, even when he was injured, is Martin Fehervary. And wow, this guy, he is the man out there. Physicality, sticks up for his teammates, skates so quickly, lays out the hits. There is a reason, and there should be no surprise why Martin Fehervary got that big contract. Lots of hits, heavy game, but he was all over the ice. But he was on the ice for all 3 goals against. So when you take a look at it, I liked his physical game. I liked how well he skated. But all things considered, being on the ice for the goals that were scored, not the greatest thing. So a bit of a mixed bag, I guess, if you will, against Martin Fehervary. But again, another guy that is ramping up as well, as we know that he was dealing with that knee inflammation that he had last season. But all things considered, love the physicality of Martin Fehervary, but needs to clean up the details. And I still think that, in that regard, that needs tightening. But am I concerned about Martin Fehervary and if he is going to be a big contributor to the Capitals this season? Absolutely not. I know what kind of player he is. Like I said, he is still just ramping up there as well. So the theme here on defense, Carberry wants guys he can trust. And that's important, right? You can score goals. You can score a lot of goals. But if your defense isn't helping the netminder keep the puck out of the back of the net, you're going to lose a lot of hockey games. And that's the thing here. It doesn't matter how old you are or what your status is. If you're calm, if you're reliable, it will keep you in the game, plain and simple. Like I talked about earlier in this segment here, that a lot of the Capitals beat writers wanted to talk to Carberry about Vincent Iorio and Dylan McElrath, but it was the player that did the things the right way, Chesley. And I think that despite, the fact that he is a younger man out there, that I think that what he did tonight put him in the good graces of Spencer Carberry, that I think that he is going to be a key piece here going forward. And right now, Chesley is trending up. Iorio and McElrath, they've got work to do. And you take a look at McElrath, you take a look at Iorio. This is a difficult position for two of those guys that if things don't pan out, they could very well be on to their next adventure. The waiver wire is not always a friendly one. And you take a look at Vincent Iorio, some good upside. Dylan McElrath, I could definitely see a team that would like to pursue a guy that leads with the physical edge. Not the greatest skater, but it might be interesting, and these guys are not going to be given a lot of different opportunities to make things right if they blow it. And I don't think that Iorio has blown it, maybe not his finest hour in the game tonight. But what we've seen in the preseason from him thus far has been pretty good. I think he needs to clean it up because, like I said, in a league of what have you done for me lately, that one game playing well can be quickly erased if you play not so well in the following game. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll continue to talk about the game. We'll talk about roster battles and what is next for this Capitals team. I'll break it all down straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in the final segment here, we're talking about roster battles. And yes, I talk about roster battles a lot because that has been the theme of training camp and the preseason for the Capitals in the 2025-2026 season. So what are some of the observations that we've noticed around the Capitals and the roster battles that are going? Because that is what is all about. October 7th is coming here. Cuts are coming. So who is making noise? And players, have impressed. Sonny Milano, I'm going to be honest with you, has surprised me. I did not expect to see, what we saw in Sonny Milano this preseason so far. Easy one, though. A veteran, creates offense. He's showing he belongs. That I think there is definitely a distinct possibility that Sonny Milano makes the roster. And then Andrew Kristol, the kid's creativity. He might not be the greatest skater. He's worked on it. He's a good skater. Is he the fastest skater on the ice? Didn't say that, but his shot is quick and his hockey IQ is off the charts. He knows where the puck is and where the other players, there's no buffering going on in his head. He sees the ice very well. If it's not to start this season, and again, I've been banging the drum on Andrew Kristol, I think that he will get a call up early in the season if there is any injury or inconsistent play. But the kid's creativity stands out, especially on the power play. Might not make the team out of camp, but he will be back. Book it. I have no doubt in my mind. Lapierre, like I talked about off the top, steady. What we've seen from him is a constant contributor. I guess I'm not going to say spectacular, but consistency. And that's one of the things that Spencer Carberry spoke about as well. Consistency, that what you're going to get from this or that player on any given night. And that is how Hendrick Lapierre is going to carve out a role on this team. Ryan Leonard as well. I was a bit concerned, right? To start the preseason, but what we have seen from him in the last couple games is very encouraging. I think, like I said earlier in the show, when I was summarizing the game, I think that he's figuring it out. This is a guy that has a long history of doing great things. Back-to-back 30-goal seasons at Boston College, killing it on the international stage. But every game that we have seen from him here as of late, he's showing up, scoring, hitting, being physical. He's forcing the issue and making a case for himself that I belong here. But like I said, earlier on defense, Chesley stock is up. Iorio and McElrath still in the fight, right? That I think, if history is any lesson, taking a look at last year, the Capitals will carry two defenders, extra defenders, and one extra forward. But, I'm not going to say that McElrath and Declan Chisholm are a lock. I think that is who is penciled in, right? And, a lot of the players I have not seen in the preseason thus far, Justin Sordiff pop off the page as well. So I was kind of hoping for more. I know that Brian McClellan was all in on Justin Sordiff, but what we saw on the game tonight is he had one shot on goal. So I hope that, it pays off for Chris Patrick, being that the fact that the Capitals did give up 2 draft picks to acquire him. But Justin Sordiff, a name in the mix as well, that, despite where you were projected to play, doesn't necessarily mean anything. But you take a look at Iorio and McElrath, they've got some ground to make up. And let's not ignore special teams. That is an 0 for 4 power play. And those are the things that are going to need to get cleaned up as well. That's the kind of thing that decides who makes the roster. If one of the young players tonight would have done a really good thing and found the back of the net, specifically on the power play, that would have really helped. And that's the kind of thing that decides who makes the roster. Coaches watch the details. Who, is recovering pucks? Who wins board battles? Who sets up screens? One guy comes to mind in particular. If a lot of these young players could take a page from another young Capital, is Connor McMichael. Kind of epitomizes a player that is willing to do whatever it takes to score a goal. Last season in particular, screening the netminder, setting up, getting greasy goals. That Connor McMichael definitely found his place. He's not, and I think he's more relatable to the younger, prospect types than maybe some of the older players. But Connor McMichael, for me, is an example of someone that does things really well. And I think that, like I said, some of these young players could definitely take a page from that. So my quick gut call here is I think that, Milano definitely could make the team. Lapierre definitely could make the team. Kristol, I want to believe, but I think that the Capitals, if I'm just going to, lean into a hunch and put aside my feelings, I think the Capitals will end up going with a Milano and a Lapierre. I really do. But again, if I was the GM, if I was the one making the decision, it would be Andrew Kristol in there as well. Leonard, again, he's making it really hard to send him down, especially what we've seen here in the last couple games. So that's the difficult part. Milano, Lapierre, Leonard, that's the front runners. Obviously, one of those players at least is probably going to get cut out of that mix. But those are the guys in the mix for these very limited jobs. And, then, where did Miroshnichenko go in all of this? And Ethan Frank, well, I think we know what happened with Ethan Frank. He hasn't really shown any glimpses of greatness. Miroshnichenko as well. So it is going to be an extremely difficult task to cut this roster down to size by the first game and Monday, as a matter of fact. So it's a difficult question for the Capitals to have to answer, and something that they're probably going to have to think about. And it's something that they're also going to probably have to kind of wait and see how things go in the next preseason game, the last preseason game, Saturday at 6 p.m., because it gets real. Caps Bruins on Wednesday, and it's going to be exciting to see ultimately what players cut the mustard and, find a spot on this final roster. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.